From the year 2009 till the present, we've been experiencing one of the greatest extended bull runs in history. But if the economy is doing so well, why are we earning less and spending more than our parents and grandparents did? Why are millennials and Gen Z more likely to experience unhappiness, anxiety, stress, depression, loneliness, and to self-harm than any generation before of record? If the economy is doing so well, why doesn't it feel like it?
Climate crisis.
Housing crisis.
Healthcare crisis.
Cost of living crisis.
Crisis of
Anxiety,
democracy.
mental health crisis.
Debt crisis.
Loneliness. Happiness.
So you're saying it's because we're lazy?
Well, yeah.
But we've all been told that money doesn't buy you happiness, so none of these bleak statistics can even partially be blamed on the rising rates of economic hardship. Apparently. So money doesn't buy you happiness, does it? Turns out, money definitely can buy you happiness. Everyone, or practically everyone, needs a base level of economic security in order to feel comfortable and happy. After that point, though, there are diminishing returns.
What's with the glasses?
To hide my black eyes. Which begs another question. Are there other things that we're commonly misled to believe about the economy? I'm no baseless conspiracy theorist. It doesn't exactly tickle my pickle when people spread vague theories like, they're lying to everybody, man. Everyone. Even you. You want me to prove it? Look at this. Look at this. Look at that. Ain't she supposed to be dead? Or whenever something bad happens to someone and it's never through any fault of their own. Damn liberals. Instead, let me be clear. The entire financial industry, alongside even our own government, are complicit in rigging the entire economy against everyone except the rich and powerful.
Wow, you don't say.
He raises a good point, actually. We've come to expect that of them. But you know what society doesn't expect? This. But you know what society doesn't expect? This. Or this.
Is that really that important though? I mean, in context.
Well, yeah. Society is very intentionally misled or kept unaware about some of the things I'm going to cover in this video. I aim to shed a bright light on the practices of the rich and powerful that they would rather keep in the dark. I am happy, I have a loving family, and I would never aim to my own life, just so we're clear. Here's the truth about money.
Money is not real. It's not real.
I hate to break it to you, but like, money isn't even real, you know? Who can print money in this country, do you know?
Nope.
What organization is allowed to print money in this country, do you know?
Food industry.
Do you think it should be legal that a private for-profit company can print money?
No.
This is not how money printing works, although we've all been led to believe that it is. Instead, the vast majority of the time, the people actually printing the money are for-profit businesses that just so happen to be extremely hostile to the working class. They call themselves banks. If you've ever gone into your overdraft at a bank, you'd of course assume that credit extended you came from the bank, who have to deduct that money from their own balance sheet to compensate. The money for mortgages, student loans, car loans, credit card debt, and even overdrawn bank accounts actually comes out of nowhere. It's thin air. Inflation. It's digital inflation, but the bank actually takes no personal liability whatsoever. Even if you don't end up paying it all back, the bank still makes money from that. So the fact that banks still charge overdraft fees, making billions each year off of society's poorest, is even more distasteful than you might have imagined. It's almost funny to think about if it wasn't actually happening. Thankfully, the greater economy operates far less like a James Bond villain. Instead of benefiting from poor people's misfortune, we can all slightly benefit from each other's success. Because the more people doing well for themselves, the more consumption can occur, which stimulates the economy to grow. Downright wholesome, synergistic situation. Or is it? I have here in my hand a list of financial assets any bank might typically hold. And here in my other hand, a list of financial assets any financial institution might hold. Now, other than being utterly riveting reads, I can assure you, they highlight an uncomfortable truth. Every asset in yellow is debt-based. That's mortgages, car loans, credit card debt, student loans, and yes, even overdrawn bank accounts. Looks like half the economy, but is your debt really that desirable an asset? Well, according to this document, A bank's typical assets are 70 to 85% made up of it. And according to this document, some of the largest financial institutions in our economy is made up of primarily debt. So yes, your debt is very, very desirable indeed. Hey, you might not know it by looking at me, but I'm actually really deeply in debt. Look. So I was wondering if you might want to grab some dinner later. You'd have to pay for it, of course. This isn't really an issue though, at least on paper. If people want to profit from interest payments on potentially low-risk consumer debt, then why not let them? It's a free market. Some of our own pensions do exactly this. There are, however, some not so great side effects of valuing debt so much in our economy. If you've ever wondered why politician after politician is seemingly worse than useless, each just making things worse than they were before, then this infatuation with debt in our economy might go away to explain the madness of it a little. It's just business.
What is the first thing you would like to do as president?
Folks, let me tell you, first thing, and it's a big one, no more income tax. Gone. Just like that. People have been getting ripped off for years. Terrible system, very corrupt. So guess what? Hardworking Americans, you get to keep your money. Does that sound like a good idea?
But how will the government continue to fund essential services?
It's easy, so easy. A beautiful, simple plan, really. No more getting ripped off in our trade deals. I know a little something about making a deal, but we take so much of theirs, and they take so very little of ours. So now, through tariffs, China pays, Europe pays, Canada, who, by the way, very unfair to us, pays. You know, people are calling me, they say, "Sir, this is genius," and you know, I don't like to brag, I'm kind of a humble guy.
But this will lead to more expensive consumer goods.
This is the price of freedom. Do you like freedom? I like freedom.
It's just that this makes it very likely that the poor and middle class will end up paying even more taxes than they were before.
No, fake news. This will be amazing, fantastic thing for our country. We have the most powerful economy. You know, people tell me, they say, "We see what you have going on over there. We want what you have." And I intend on keeping it that way. Under me, America will be so rich, so powerful. It's a beautiful thing, really. The truth about our economy is an ugly one and a paradoxical one too. For the economy to be doing well as we know it, it currently requires a lot of people to be not doing so well.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
That means the economy benefits from a high percentage of its population being in debt, because debt is literally the fuel to stimulate financial markets, to invest, to generate profits, and that has a knock-on effect beneficially for the rest of the economy. And long term, there's no downsides to this. Just joking. It leads to more inequality, more recessions, and if left unchecked will be the collapse of society as we know it. Now, I could come down really hard on our political leaders for ineptitude, for intentionally making things worse for personal gain, or for simply getting paid by donations to do so, but I don't know if they're entirely to blame. Hanlon's razor is a philosophical principle which states that we should never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by ignorance, stupidity. Considering then that inequality has been an issue all throughout human history, I'm going to assume we just don't know any better way of doing things. Although closing some of the loopholes the rich use to avoid paying tax does seem like a no-brainer. Now, you may be tempted into thinking, as I was initially, that we're criticizing the obvious here, and there's no point educating ourselves further about it, because at the end of the day, politicians are always going to be corrupt. The banking industry is far too complex for us to ever understand, and the thing ultimately that's to blame for all of this is not corporate CEOs. No, it's money itself, an inanimate object. Now, that sounds stupid, but that's exactly what we're taught. Allow me to demonstrate. The Bible says that money is the root of all evil. Except it doesn't. That's a misquotation. It actually says that the love of money is the root of all evil. I'm going to need my car for this next one. You know that image of someone having a carrot dangled in front of them with a stick? It gives us this image that no matter how hard that person run, or the metaphor being, no matter how hard that person works, as long as they stay in their lane, they will never get that carrot or make the amount of money that they want to make. Now, we're often taught to blame the carrot for this problem, or ourselves, which, to be fair, There's a good degree of self-analysis necessary, but how come we never look at the person with the stick? Or how about the metaphor of jobs being like an endless escalator that you just keep coming onto, and that's the problem, not with the people that actually design the things. Hope you can see where I'm going with this. Or the most popular image surrounding money in our cultural zeitgeist, it being akin to a cheese that lures people into the trap of working every day. Ergo, the issue must be with yourself, or with money, and not with the makers of the trap itself. But the moment we think about how we'd pay for groceries using anything else, my point exactly. Money is extremely convenient, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and we all know it. On some level, we're being distracted from looking deeply into the real cause of the issues in the economy. We're tempted to blame ourselves, or even an inanimate object, for any perceived grievances. Now, whether this is intentionally done or not, it's still no less convenient a situation for the financial elite. Let's take Sheila, for example. She works at a large company and she works hard, but she has no notion of how much money her efforts generate for the company day after day. Despite working there for years, she's never once directly profited off of anything she does. But at the end of each month, her boss gives her a number that's meant to represent fair compensation for the value she's brought to his company. A little soulless and impersonal, maybe, but far more serious a problem than that. The number feels quite small to her. Despite working hard, she's not confident about making any strong wage increase demands because she has no idea if this figure is fair compensation. She suspects it isn't, but can't prove it. I would describe this incredibly relatable scenario as socially acceptable exploitation. But just because someone might feel obligated to put up with an annoying job because an annoying job is better than no job, still doesn't make it any less exploitative or annoying. Why shouldn't it be a law to allow an employee from seeing the value they provide to their company if they request it?
Pardon me?
And why is it such a common practice by companies to prohibit their workforces from discussing their salaries with one another, despite this being entirely illegal? It's not like this is based on advice from the world's largest consultancy firm, literally teaching CEOs how to better exploit their workforces. No, money's to blame. This is a chart by McKinsey Consultancy. Ironic considering they're responsible for a lot of what this chart is depicting. But we see that ever since the 1960s, the working class's share of all income earned is falling, and it's falling at an increased rate. They do, however, argue that this has very little to do with people being paid less, which is funny seeing how their business model is advising CEOs how to pay their employees less, often with highly immoral advice. But business appears to be booming, with CEOs making 350 times more than typical workers. And this trend of ever higher and higher CEO salaries started in, would you believe it, the same time employee wages stopped rising. This infamous chart shows that worker salaries were highly correlated to the value they brought, but in the late 1960s, early 70s, they decoupled from one another. Despite a steady rise in workers' productivity, salaries have not kept pace and have stagnated for decades now. Although I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this chart is disputed. Measuring productivity, it's a bit of a nightmare, and the methodology used here, despite coming from a respected source, is a bit of a joke among economists. You guys saw that chart from the Economic Policy Institute too? They measured productivity, but they conflated income metrics. They use a static linear interpretation that completely disregards exogenous factors and temporal variables. Poor dears got confused by the heterogeneity of expectations and heteroscedasticity in the stochastic discount floor.
Embarrassing!
Despite the surprising fact that humor apparently does exist in macroeconomics, this chart is not funny. Gets me every time. Cut that part out. Despite there being a great debate on the exact size of the productivity pay gap, economists can agree at least that one exists and that it is getting bigger. Thank you for confirming the obvious. But listen, I'm going to need you to come a little closer. Pay attention to the implications that stem from this obvious fact. This means that the vast majority of the population are in real time getting poorer despite working. How long do we expect that can continue for? Eventually, it could threaten to destroy society as we know it. You know what? Cue the dramatic music. People need to hear this.
Until the working class learn to bend the economy to their own benefit, the enemy of the working class is the economy itself, and all the agents who in their twisted wisdom seek to prop it up. The economy is designed for a few to become ultra-rich and the rest impoverished. Intentionally. You never played Monopoly. It's unsustainable. That's why the rich are building underground bunkers.
No one's listening. Let me try a more personal approach. Hey, you on Facebook? Well, did you know Mark Zuckerberg and a bunch of other billionaires are building for themselves self-sustaining nuclear underground bunkers? I mean, what's up with that? Do they know something we don't? I imagine it'd be a good way to die, though. A nuclear explosion, nice and quick. So, do you come here often? Despite the importance of my message, I recruited no new followers. I struck out with literally everyone. But it did remind me of something a great philosopher once said. Most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. Or as John Steinbeck put it, the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. On a macro level, I'm not advocating for any specific type of reform. I'm simply trying to raise awareness of how unsustainable things currently are. Think Monopoly. It quite well demonstrates this. But I think Jenga can work too. An economy is built up of various methods of generating value. Businesses, trade deals, banking, etc. Once an economy is mature enough, or built up to a certain size, it may become difficult to continue to rapidly expand upward. Unless, of course, you take from the poor and working class people and give it to those at the top. I'm going to show you exactly how they do this, but this is how a significant portion of modern economies fuel their growth currently. Taking a cursory look at the economy from the outside, and things look pretty great. It's big, it's growing even. It's just that when you really take a close look, you see a lot of that growth is pretty precarious and at times even downright unsustainable. And if you don't agree, just have a look at this. Since the 1970s till today, median house prices have increased by an average of 300%. Education costs have risen by an average of 1,500%. $125 invested in the 70s would get you 900% more stock ownership than $1,000 would today. CEO pay has risen by an average of 1,500%. The working class, meanwhile, have suffered a 76% pay cut in real terms due to the higher cost of living. The world's top 1%, who used to own roughly 20% of the world's wealth in the 70s, well, the wealth has gone up. They now own nearly half or over half of the world's wealth. And this is adjusted for inflation. I'm sorry if I've ruined Jenga forever for you. And you can do this with any decade since at least the 1950s. I'm not just cherry picking data here. Get it?
Those aren't cherries.
The real reason the majority of us are getting the short end of the stick here, however, isn't all down to nefarious villainy. What do you mean they're poisonous? You know that moment when the penny drops and you have a big new idea? Well, with the formation of the following ideas, pennies were dropped all right. All of them from worker salaries. The shift from sometimes specialized manufacturing to mostly simple service-oriented jobs meant less job security and lower wages. Multinational corporations, recognizing they could outsource for much cheaper labor, also put downward pressure on wages. Technological advancements and automation have displaced many middle-income jobs. Labor unions pushing for fairer compensation have mostly been dismantled. Tax cuts have been given on capital gains and high-income earners. Inflation, obviously. And possibly the most significant final nail in the coffin, financial institutions have grown so big that despite the risk in any economy, they're too big to fail. But how can you be too big to fail when the thing that you've built is increasingly designed to fail? Well, the banks have asked themselves this question as well, and from what I can assume is finding no satisfactory answer, they've asked themselves a different question. How can we make as much money as possible before it does? The economy looked bigger and more robust than ever, but taking a closer look, you can see just how horrifyingly greedy things had become. The real estate market was roughly $18 trillion, a bedrock of the US economy. On top of that was the mortgage industry, roughly $14 trillion at the time. Then you had some of those mortgages bundled and resold as securities, and some of those were repackaged again into CDOs and CDO squared and CDO cubed. But we won't get into that. Then the bank sold over, how much was it? $1 trillion of CDO squared and CDO cubed? Like, how stupid can you be? Savvy investors could see a housing market bubble forming, so they wanted insurance to protect their real estate investments, and the banks were all too happy to sell it to them. They called their insurance the credit default swap, and it was even bigger than the housing industry itself. And never wanting to leave any money on the table here, the banks also introduced institutional gambling, a way of simply betting on how profitable or unprofitable someone thought the CDO market was going to be. They called it the synthetic CDO, a $7 trillion industry alone.
Synthetic! You're killing me!
There's this great scene in The Big Short which likens this to greedy people betting on the outcome of other people's bets. The truth is, though, a significant portion of the money being used to gamble in this way is regular people's savings and pensions, often without them being aware that it's happening. It allows bankers to turn their industries into casinos where they win regardless of outcome because it's not their money and they get paid in management fees. The credit default swap or insurance market was huge, but may have looked okay from the outside until the moment you take a look at who would be largely responsible for paying out for any claims if the housing market started to go down. The entire US banking industry is estimated to have been an $11 trillion industry at the time, underpinning everything above, but they don't actually keep that much cash on them. A conservative estimate is that for every $1 a bank has, it owes $24 to other parties, a 25-to-1 leverage. So they realistically had maybe $500 billion of liquid assets. A collapse was inevitable. But if that's true, why couldn't more people see a collapse coming? But that's actually kind of the point. You're not really supposed to be able to see what's going on, or at least understand what you're looking at. The truth is that the vast majority of these blocks being traded recklessly by the wealthy are the savings, the pensions, and the payment obligations of regular working class people, just hidden under layer after layer of complexity. Allow me to demonstrate. This is a house. It was paid for using a mortgage. You would think, therefore, there's only one owner of this house, but you'd be wrong.
Who are you? You can't film me, yeah?
You know, I was just saying you're not the only owner of this house. You see, despite only one grumpy old man thinking he owns said house, it actually has at least multiple different owners. This is possible because the originating bank holds legal title to the mortgage, but they sold the rights for the repayments on it to another, which a government-sponsored enterprise pays for and puts into a mortgage-backed security, which an investment bank then buys and slices up into tranches and sells to companies like BlackRock. The low-rated tranches they couldn't sell get swept up and put into a collateralized debt obligation, which a CDO manager buys, who then puts it into a special purchase vehicle, or SPV, which is sold to investors, which the investment firm then uses as a collateral to obtain a loan, which is invested into a structured investment vehicle, which the bank actually created by putting CDOs into other CDOs so that they could print more asset-backed commercial paper from it to use as collateral for a loan to invest in. Sorry, that sounded like utter madness, but that's actually what can happen. It's called a derivative or a security. Your car loan, your rent payment, cash in your bank account, even your very life expectancy. It isn't safe from having it being abstracted into a slip of paper, which is then traded for profit somewhere in the system. Eventually, they can be bundled with other similar slips of paper into yet another financial product and sold again to investors. This increases correlation risk, liquidity risk, counterparty risk, and systemic risk in the economy, while the bankers make money on creation, management fees, and trading fees the more times they do this. But this can happen over and over again, causing the economy to become so intertwined, there's sometimes multiple owners for just one underlying asset. So much so, it's entirely possible that this old man has invested into his own mortgage, and he'd never know. Would you be okay paying for your own house twice, despite getting no additional equity in it?
What are you talking about?
This makes us more reliant on the banking industry just to tell us what's going on in the financial markets, to which knowledge they exploit to their advantage, with things like high-frequency trading bots, which are part of their private and for-profit trading departments. An unbelievably massive conflict of interest. Unlike this course I'm selling, down from £1,000 to just $999.99. So when the financial market risks a collapse like it did in 2008 due to the housing market, or in 2020 due to COVID, the government has to step in and bail them out, or risk, for instance, 10,000 people all turning up at this doorstep, all claiming they want their individual brick of it back. Look, I probably own at least a couple of grams of the cement here, so you actually have no right to tell me I can't film here.
Oh, chill.
So these derivative products increase risk in all types of areas. Liquidity risk, correlation risk, counterparty risk, but to give it all one blanket neat term, systemic risk. Meaning, the more of them the banks sell, the greater the threat to the entire system. So how much do you reckon the banks have sold of these products then?
I don't really know.
I don't know. I don't even know.
Oh no. Am I stupid? I can't think, bro. I can't do it.
I don't know, man. I just want to have a cig.
You can see trust in the banks is at an all-time high, but it's actually much worse. The notional value of all these types of paper products is $750 trillion. More money than there is in the entire worldwide economy, many, many times over. Banks offer high wages to smart people just to think of new ways they can package stuff up to be sold as a financial product, which is getting harder as they literally run out of ideas. For instance, banks can offer you a prediction product to guess what the future value of this house might be, whether the interest rate on its mortgage will go up, if the cost of construction materials for any necessary work are going to rise, to even whether or not the house will burn down. Hello? Yes. I'd like to take out some catastrophe bonds on a residential property, please. Oh. And the primary peddlers of these derivative products globally are JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and Barclays. Big up the UK, you know. And they must absolutely love doing it. Instead of selling £1 million wardrobe of a home in central London, they can make a gambling or speculative product for it instead and sell tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds worth of it. It's a practice I can only imagine billionaires in the financial industry are quite fond of.
You and me, the brokers, we're taking home cold hard cash via commission, mother.
Despite how accurate that movie scene is, it really only scratches the surface. Banking CEOs create products that get riskier the more times it's sold. Then they sell it to their clients. They give loans to other financial institutions so they can buy more of it. They don't keep much in savings, and they can get a government bailout should things go wrong. That's quite a slap in the face. Oh, that was way too hard. But the slaps to the face don't stop there. According to the Institute of International Finance, global debt is now over 320 trillion, or 3.5 times what the globe makes in a year. A great deal of that debt has been spent giving it to the banking industry. But it's not like you had to pay personally for any of that debt. So governments and corporations are pretty free to pile on more and more of it. But is it a problem for the working class? Well, no, it isn't. There you are. Unless, of course, you don't want increasingly frequent flash crashes in the economy, increasing amounts of inflation to prop the whole thing up, a higher cost of living as a result, asset price hikes on things like homes, increased difficulty in securing a mortgage, and cost-cutting measures axing jobs, raise taxes, increases in child mortality rates in developing countries, less crisps in a bag, and less government spending on healthcare, security, education, and less fixing of these damn potholes. But this chart of national debt could probably also make an economist laugh. I don't get it. This is the officially reported data. So despite that being dubious itself, it actually captures nothing of the economic activities of, say, for instance, the shadow banking industry. Spooky. According to hip and exciting organizations like the Financial Stability Board and International Monetary Fund, the size of the shadow banking industry, organizations which operate like a bank but with much less regulatory scrutiny, are at least half the size of the global economy alone. If a regular bank can conservatively operate at 25 times more in debt than their actual assets are, one can only imagine at how much debt the shadow banking industry operates at. If only we were 320 trillion in debt. If only. There's an economic theory known as helicopter money. It's the concept of distributing money generated through inflation to individuals that need it the most, as if throwing cash out of a window to the needy people on the streets below, instead of giving it primarily to our financial institutions, a bit like the US stimulus checks were designed to do during the pandemic. Except that was mostly for show, as trillions more were handed out to financial institutions. But again, not directly, so we don't see it happening quite so easily. Instead, the Fed, as part of its pandemic response, offered loans to corporations with rates as low as 0.7%. Apple, a company with over $200 billion in cash reserves, took $14.7 billion from the Fed in 2020, which they used to buy their own stocks and reduce their tax burden at the same time. The airline industry spent of their free-flowing cash reserves on stock buybacks prior to the pandemic. Despite this intentional disregard to save for a rainy day, they were given of taxpayer money. And these are just two examples of potentially hundreds. But who owns the most Apple or airline stock? Vanguard, BlackRock, Berkshire Hathaway. A lot of the stimulus efforts went to the pockets of some of the richest who didn't need it, while the working class to this day continued to suffer for it the most due to the higher subsequent cost of living. Maybe try the helicopter strategy next time. Governments come out with at least one financial annual report giving a detailing of what they've been doing with taxpayer money, or lack thereof, and shockingly, they've taken full accountability for the rising debt levels. I'm just joking. Usual culprits blamed instead: climate change and the costs of transitioning to net zero, defense spending, global uncertainty. But the main culprit, the one that is consistently blamed, is welfare. The main claimed reason for running a deficit is welfare spending. What a claim. You know, this is all your fault. Please don't hit me again. In the interest of fairness, governments aren't entirely to blame here. They are somewhat at the mercy of the economy themselves. Even if your newly elected official came out with a mandate that he's going to slash funding of the financial industry and instead he's going to divert that money to welfare, let's say, well, then the economy might crash, people lose their jobs, and we might end up with more poverty as a result. So economic policy can be a real pick-your-poison type situation.
We need to provide aid to our most vulnerable in society, the CEOs. No, I'm not joking here, people. Our biggest companies, they're hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. Google, Apple, Microsoft, you name it, all of them, and they need our help. You want to see the next $100 million season of Amazon's The Rings of Power or not?
But before you start praying for the emotional well-being of Jeff Bezos, this is just their level of outstanding liabilities, not their total bank balances.
Phew.
Practically all of the top companies around the globe take on high levels of debt. But as you might imagine, high levels of debt increase the chance of a financial crisis. So what exactly has changed since 2008 and the last major crash? According to the International Monetary Fund, the global corporate debt increased significantly after the 2008 financial crisis. Wait, what? Companies take advantage of lower interest rates than are available to the general public. By the end of 2019, global non-financial corporate debt was double the levels seen in 2008. Are you kidding me? During the pandemic, corporate debt surged even further. At least Rings of Power is good. It's a joke, by the way. Now, if you've not happened to go into a depressive, catatonic state from watching this video yet, just wait till you hear about this dick. Not so called because he was annoying or anything. He was an economist named Richard Cantillon. We tend to imagine that when new money is injected into the system, like through debt creation and inflation, the price of everything inflates in response to that new money. So we're all negatively impacted by inflation when we want to buy something as a result. But according to Dick, that's not how this works. Here on the left, we have 3 primary ways money is created. Here on the right, 3 main recipients of that new money. But if we're getting really specific, it looks like this. And we haven't even really gotten into the heart of the issue yet. When this money is spent, only then do the prices adjust within that sector. Hence why houses, stocks, and commodities continue to rise first, while other sectors take longer to experience the price increases. So this financing of the financiers gives them the lowest prices on assets to stimulate the economy. This money then eventually trickles down, but when the last recipients receive it, typically being average workers, prices have already risen, their savings have been eroded, and their purchasing power is reduced. This is known in economics as a Cantillon Effect. So according to Dick, CEOs provide no economic value because they are destroying the purchasing power of others. And as a final sweet conclusion to the whole thing, if you were to try and fix the issue of inequality by, let's say for instance, funding additional welfare programs, you may just end up making inequality worse. No, I can see why he was called Dick now. Not that they're bothered by it anyway. The wealthiest in our society suffer none of the ill consequences of inflation, not compared to the overwhelming benefits of it to them anyway. The more the better, as far as they're concerned. Unless they consider it a massive moral hazard to purposefully push for more debt and inflation in the economy through political donations. Good job, then. Our banking and political industry is run by moral paragons of virtue. Thank you. You were right, Dick. I get what you were trying to tell us all along. Our banking system is run by the mob, and money is cheap for the rich and expensive for the poor. But what do you expect me to do about it? I think it's time I watch some Rings of Power and get a normal person wallpaper. Richard Cantillon is not widely recognized. Despite being a founding figure in modern economics, his work isn't commonly taught in universities. Any notion this is because his teachings go against the interests of the rich and powerful who may or may not be funding the universities depending on what they teach is completely unfounded and logical. Okay, so a university economics course which just rails on the entire system the entire time as being unjust and unfair isn't exactly helpful to its students. Wow, the world would be better off without me. But consider for a moment what we are commonly taught about money, or what you should do with your money. Go to college or university, buy a house, invest in a pension, and save your money. Or in other words, give us your debt, give us more debt, give us your money, and give us some more. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do any of these things. I'm just saying that all of these things, conveniently, can be securitized, derivatized, and traded by the rich to enrich themselves. Why is it that nothing else about money is more commonly taught? As a kid, I once asked my mom, why does money have any value if the government can simply print more of it? She said it's tied to gold. Yeah, we grew up quite poor. Now, if you happen to be a financial CEO watching this video, then I'm sure everything I've discussed so far is amazing, maybe even hilarious. For the rest of us, it's fairly depressing. To be clear, I don't think things currently are so terrible. It could be argued that the living conditions of the working class these days are some of the best in human history. My point is simply that it is declining rapidly. If we don't educate ourselves, we risk our current and especially future financial rights and privileges being eroded even further. Which begs the question, how did we end up in this situation? For that, we need to start at the beginning. Okay, maybe not that far back. Fast forward to the first ancient civilizations, and income inequality was slightly worse than today, if you can believe it. If you were part of the working class, you were either a peasant or a slave. Slaves actually being the primary driver of their economies. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and society has evolved. Now agriculture drives the economy. The working class would work the lands owned by their lord and pay him regular tributes for the privilege. Once cities got big enough, trade became crucial and merchants drove the economy. That is, if your country's monarch gave you their permission first. Can't have riffraff making bank. There is a class system, after all, that they took very seriously. Then society evolves again and the English Empire dominates the globe. The good old days. And they allow citizens a bit more freedom to trade and own businesses. This is the first form of early capitalism. Then some Yankees on the other side of the world win their economic independence from the English king. July 4th was truly a tragic day, but a great chance to see if capitalism, free from the restraints of any king, could actually work well for an economy. The answer was an astounding yes. Fast forward to the end of World War II, and the US has the largest economy in the world and is sitting on 20,000 tons of gold, while Europe is basically bankrupt. The US promises to help, so Allied leaders meet here, sign a paper. The USD becomes the world reserve, used in an estimated 88% of all transactions globally today, which gave the US extreme monetary privileges, like, for instance, the ability to print money without suffering many of the negative consequences of doing so. Fast forward to 1971, and the US now has no gold. Europe was just trading too many of their accrued US dollars for it. So this guy rips up that paper, but no one gets mad. Europe knows it's in their best interests to keep the spirit of capitalism and free trade alive, or they might risk getting trade embargoed like Cuba did in the 60s. So everyone keeps playing capitalist ball with the US. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, the USSR isn't playing capitalist ball at all. They prefer commie ball, and they've grown to be the second largest economy in the world. And the US took that personally. The two nations go head to head in a size measuring contest. Which one of them has got the biggest rocket? Despite the USSR having an impressively large economy, they find themselves lacking in comparison. They would later blame the Cold War as a significant reason for their shriveling size and eventual collapse. This brief, overly simplistic history lesson to say, if there's one constant in life, it's change. Previous economic models have all had their rise and eventual fall. Capitalism has remained the backbone of the West for a long time now, primarily because of its enforcement, but also for its ability to do three things: generate wealth, improve living conditions, and because it can adapt to the changing times. As long as it continues to do these three things, capitalism will reign for the foreseeable future. If it fails to do them, you can expect the following to occur. Everyone's favorite, recessions. A big, prolonged one, and small, frequent ones. Governments would slash public spending, freeze wages, and increase taxes. Strikes, protests, civil disobedience, to put it mildly, would all be on the rise. The government debt would skyrocket, as more debt is required just to pay the interest for the old. Trade wars, proxy, or even direct wars to secure natural resources. Industries would start to fail despite being of critical importance. Food, water, energy production, particularly. Eventually, a financial reset could be proposed, where economic leaders and multinational corporations take control over essential sectors like agriculture, energy, healthcare, and more. You may have noticed something about this list. Hang on a minute. This isn't YouTube. Everything on the list is clearly happening, which could explain why there's agendas to make farming, for instance, as difficult as it is all across the globe, or why there's idiotic energy policies across Europe, and why there's a 9-year waiting list to see a dentist via the NHS. But giving over more power to the powerful who cause these issues in the first place is the opposite of a reset. But it will be presented as the only way to improve economic inequality, offering things like universal basic income, and also a necessary thing to save the planet through their carbon neutral policies. And what's scarier still, we may have no alternative. And then what? A great question there. We give over even more critical powers of society to megacorps. Then what? There's a whole generation of media dedicated to exploring that very question. It's called dystopian. I shouldn't be smiling. That's a dreadful thing to point out, really. But this is all just a conspiracy theory at the end of the day. It would take an enormous cooperative effort to do all this. And there are more reasonable explanations, possibly. Should we become anarchists then? Socialists? Feminists? No. Individualists, perhaps. There is a ever-rising need for us to become self-reliant. So, develop a skill. Be anxiously engaged in a good cause. Or, as Jordan Peterson might put it, pick up your damn cross. Bear your burdens. Tomorrow is not promised. Sorry, I'm no good at impressions. The truth about the free market economy is that it's becoming increasingly less free. So take advantage of what you can, while you can, before it's too late. The best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is now. I said that. Don't fact check that. We need to provide aid, people. Since the 1970s till today, median house prices have increased by an average of 300%. This brief, oversimplistic history lesson to say, if there's one change in life, it's constant. Instead of benefiting from poor people's misfortune, we can all benefit from each other's success. Because the more people doing well for themselves, for the economy although closing some of the loopholes, the tax, oh, come on. That was good. Hanlon's razor is a philosophical principle which states that we should never attribute to malice that which can adequately be explained by malice. Was that a Freudian slip?
Money doesn't buy you happiness. Well, it's hard to explain because money, like now, I've got a bed for tonight, so that's made me happy. So it can make you happy. But I know in the back of my head, I've got to go through this again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's not happiness, it's more of a case of relief.
How would you say specifically it's getting worse?
Because people are starting to act as if it's okay for people to be homeless, not to have a home.
Right.
And it's basically a case of it's become the norm in society for people to see homeless people and not think nothing of it.
Yeah.
As if it's
inevitable.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? If it's not such a bad thing, all homeless, where it's a case of to not have a home is horrible.
I hope people watching this might feel a bit more inclined to help next time they pass someone on the street. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.